Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, usually we pretty much just focus on professional basketball. Sometimes we'll throw in, football or baseball, very rarely hockey, occasionally college football, maybe sometimes soccer when Italy is doing well, Sap, you like to talk about them. But
That's been a long time, Jet.
yeah.
They haven't done well in a long, long time. Although they
So
did win Euro 2020, which was played in 2021. But other than that, the last decade's been rough for my paisans.
Well, maybe you'll get to see them in person, Sap, as the next World Cup is going to be there's going to be games in New England at Gillette Stadium. So if we draw Italy here, then you can go see them in person. If they make it.
Absolutely.
If they make
Well,
it.
let's hope they make it. They didn't even qualify last time around. And again, it would be the closest thing we'll see to championship play at Gillette Stadium, the way the Patriots are going. I don't think we're going to see too many impressive games by the home team in the next few years.
Yeah, again, here we go talking about football. But this is all to say we are going to spend a little bit of time today starting the show talking about college basketball because the tournament starts. Well, it starts technically tonight with these play-in games, but it starts in earnest on Thursday in the first round. And so, everybody's getting their brackets together, filling out their brackets. It kind of got us thinking, and this is a topic that you brought up, Sap, which I think is really interesting, is that college basketball is really not what it used to be. Not in terms of the games are still exciting, especially in the tournament, and not taking away from that, but there's a real lack of marquee names anymore and a marquee rivalries where the two teams just hate each other's guts. That sort of happened throughout sports, but really I think the biggest example we've seen of that is in, I'd say, men's college basketball. And it's not something that it's not like we've gone a really long time without it. It's something that's sort of happened, not necessarily since the one and done's been applied, Seth, because then we still had really great memories of guys like Kevin Durant, and Greg Oden, Michael Beasley. These some great players who won Player of the Year in college. But I'd say the past 4 or 5 years, Seth, it really is just oh, yeah, North Carolina, but can you name any players on that team? UConn won last year. They didn't have any top draft picks. They have a couple guys just in the NBA. There's the 4 1 seeds this year. There's no marquee player on those teams. So, Sap, what's happened to college basketball?
Well, when was the last time we had a player who was Player of the Year caliber, who led his team to the national championship and was one and done and was the first pick in the NBA and then became an NBA superstar? When was the last time that all happened?
It was supposed to be Greg Oden, but
I'm going to go with Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis in 2012. Kentucky won the national championship.
They did win the national championship.
He was a surefire #1 overall pick. Just had a great career. Won a championship with the Lakers. Since then, just look at the champions. They've come from what? Louisville. We saw Connecticut. We saw a couple of times with Villanova, North Carolina. Virginia won it in 19. And then the last couple of champions have been Kansas a couple of years ago. Last year, it was Connecticut. None of those teams had surefire future all-stars or Hall of Famers. Really, you have to go back to Anthony Davis. So there's a lack of star power. Look at the best players in the NBA right now, right? Luka, Nikola, Giannis. None of those guys played college basketball. SGA was one and done. Jason Tatum was one and done, and their teams didn't really go all that far in the tournament as well.
Right.
Joel Embiid played at Kansas, but they got knocked out early in the tournament.
And he didn't play. He didn't play in the tournament.
He didn't play in the tournament. That's right. It's a good point that you just brought up. Wiggins played in the tournament. It was kind of a no-show in early in that 2014 tournament. So we haven't seen that where in years past we saw, look, in 1982, the national championship game, you had Michael Jordan, James Worthy, Patrick Ewing all on the court together. The greatest college basketball matchup ever. It wasn't a great game necessarily, but the buildup was great, was Magic against Bird in 1979. And that is still the most viewed game in the history of basketball, college or pro basketball in terms of TV ratings. Magic won the national championship. The next year, he's with the Lakers. They win the NBA championship. We know what Magic and Bird did for the next decade. Plus, you just don't see that anymore. So it's mostly teams that have upperclassmen. There's a lot of the transfer portal, obviously, which allows players to go from team to team to team. And it's just kind of a mismatch of players that maybe they bond together at the right time. They go on and win a national championship. But there's certainly no star power like we saw, even like I'd say 12 years ago when you saw Kentucky win the national championship with Anthony Davis. Since then, it's been, nice teams, well-coached teams, good programs, good players, but nothing extraordinary. The closest we may have come to that, Jet, was probably in 2019 when Zion led Duke, but they lost in the Elite Eight. You had Zion, R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish. That was supposed to be the team that was just going to run through the regular season and then be unbeatable in the postseason, and they weren't. That would probably have been the last star-studded team that won a national championship, but they lost in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I mean, you even look at SAP, like you said, the past couple of years, looking at sort of like these blue blood programs like Kansas. Kansas won the national championship in 2022, so the year prior to UConn winning last year. And looking at their roster, great college players, but the best NBA player they have on that roster is probably Christian Braun, who's on the Nuggets and had like one good game in the finals. Certainly not anywhere close to a star level player. Last year's UConn team, again, a really good team. They're really good again this year. But if you look at their roster, none of these guys have really made noise in the NBA. I know Andre Jackson Jr. had a really nice dunk the other night in garbage time, but that's about it. And then Baylor a couple of years ago, that was sort of a surprise national champion in that the program hasn't really accomplished much up until that point. And the two guys who were drafted, Davion Mitchell and Jared Butler, are both fine NBA players, but they're role players, Sap. And so, where are the guys who become NBA star players? Like you said, they're coming from Europe. They're playing in the G League Ignite or Overtime Elite. They're not going to college. And if you look at guys like the Player of the Year, Zach Edey, I think he was the Player of the Year last year too. He's I think like 7'2", the center on Purdue. Great college basketball player, but he's projected as I saw the last pick in the second round. So, I mean, slow lumbering, that's not going to work in the NBA. And so these are the stars you have in college, and their game doesn't translate well to the NBA. So I don't know that there's a fix for college basketball, but it's certainly not nearly the product that it was, because when you're talking about sports, you really have to sell names, and college basketball doesn't really have names. The biggest name they have, it's in college sports actually, is in women's college basketball, and that's Caitlin Clark. Most people who follow college sports know who Caitlin Clark is, and probably can name you maybe one, maybe zero players in collegiate men's basketball.
The ticket prices for the championship game on the women's side are going for double the value of the championship tickets on the men's side. So that's how popular women's basketball has become because of Caitlin Clark. Men's basketball at the collegiate level doesn't have a star even close to Caitlin Clark. Like you said, Zach Edey, wonderful player, but he projects as maybe a backup center in the NBA if he's fortunate, even though he's 7'2", 280 pounds. I think there's a few other reasons, too, why the sport's kind of lost some of its luster. Not just the tournament, but even the regular season is, I think there's a bit of overexposure. Like every game is on TV, which is nice. It's a nice thing to have, but at times a bit of overexposure. And again, I don't want to sound like the old guy, but I'm 60 years old, so I am the old guy because you're nowhere near 60 years old. The Celtics in 1978 drafted Larry Bird as a junior eligible. We didn't even know who the hell the guy was. We didn't even know he was white. He went by the name at the time of Larry Joe Bird, and then people find out, oh, he's a white guy from Indiana State. And he made it clear he was going to go back for his senior year. He goes back his senior year. They go undefeated, get all the way to the national championship game before losing to Magic Johnson and the Michigan State Spartans. We didn't see him play at all until the end of February when they played Wichita State in a conference game on NBC on a Sunday afternoon. Again, this is 1979.
Like a man of mystery,
ESPN. Yeah. It was, and it was like...
Wasn't it the same Sap with Dr. J, and he was sort of like, everybody knew, okay, Dr. J is the best player of the planet at this point, but he wasn't playing in the NBA, so it was hard to see him?
Yeah, exactly, until 1976, when the NBA absorbed 4 ABA teams, and the best player from the ABA went to the NBA and became the face of the NBA immediately, and certainly one of its best players. Yeah, it was just this mystery man, and I think we saw that with Larry Bird at the time because they weren't on TV at the moment because this predated ESPN. Then ESPN came along in September of '79, and Bird had already become a Celtic, and they started to show games, and you got more exposure. And that's really, to me, the height of college basketball. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, because of my age, I look at the early '80s, like the Big East absolutely went bonkers. You had a team in Washington, D.C., Georgetown, which was very polarizing, led by Patrick Ewing. At St. John's, which represented New York City, you had Chris Mullen, a great player. BC Eagles were a contender year in and year out. Syracuse became a major player. Yeah, and this is actually before Connecticut got good, because Connecticut didn't get good for
They
another
were doormat.
decade.
Yeah, they were
They
doormat
really
at
were.
that period of
Yeah, and then
time.
Jim Calhoun went there, built the program, and the rest is history. You had Villanova and Philadelphia. So all the major markets were represented, and the sport really grew. The one other thing I'll say, too, about what makes the NCAA men's tournament, and maybe to a lesser degree, the women's tournament, bizarre in a sense. This is the only sporting event I know where the height of popularity in this event takes place the first 2 days of the event, right? Thursday and Friday,
Yeah.
the round of 64 will be the most popular days. And then it becomes less enthralling and less popular as it goes on. I think the only thing you compare it to, and I don't know much about this sport, is NASCAR, which opens up its season with the Daytona 500 in February, and then every other event doesn't measure up to the very first event of the year.
That's how they open their season, then I'm forced to believe you, because you could have
believe
said
that's
anything.
the case.
You could have
Yeah,
said anything, Sap. You could have said any race, and I would have believed you.
I don't think a 35-year-old Jewish guy from Boston and a 60-year-old Italian-American guy from Boston know much about NASCAR.
We're not the target audience.
No, we're not the target audience. Certainly not. Although I've always wanted to go just to kind of, soak
they have
in
a
the
track
atmosphere.
in New Hampshire, right? They have a track
They do.
in New
I might have to go up there and see what it's all about. But isn't it kind of strange that Thursday and Friday will be the two most popular days of the tournament, and then it gets less?
Yeah,
popular?
everything gets a little bit less popular. It is strange, but you're 100% right. It's true. I mean, all eyes are on those first 2 days of the tournament. And typically those are when you get, those really, really exciting games with all the buzzer beaters, because there's more games, so there's apt to be more buzzer beaters. I think, Sap, you're also touching on something when you're talking about the Big East, in that what I talked about at the intro, about the sort of changing dynamics of college and rivalries, is there's been so much conference realignment and stuff like that. Like, you don't really have any rivals anymore, other than, like, okay, yes, North Carolina and Duke are rivals. They hate each other. That will always be the case. But, like, these teams that had long-standing, decades-long rivalries are now, they don't play each other anymore, or in different conferences. So when they do play each other, the games don't really mean much of anything. It's done the same thing in football too. It's sapped the life out of a lot of football rivalries too, because teams keep moving, and now, like, Oregon's going to the Big Ten, and they don't have any relationship prior to this with Penn State or Wisconsin or Michigan, really, other than, the odd non-conference game every 15 to 20 years. And in basketball, the same thing is sort of happening. It's definitely, it hurts the sport from that perspective, from the building rivalries perspective. The conference commissioners seem to think it helps the sport in terms of revenue, and I guess the dollar figures bear that out, but it doesn't make the product on the court any better. And I wonder too, Sap, with the one and done stuff, and all these players who are, the best players in the country going to play either professional in Europe for a year or to the G League for a year, do you think it's a matter of fans knowing that they're not seeing the best players play anymore in college? Or do you think it's a matter of the product on the court isn't as good because the best players aren't playing? Or maybe a little bit of both?
And probably a little bit of both, but I think it's mostly because the best players aren't playing. And again, I think you bring up a good point with the lack of rivalries right now. Like, Houston is now in the Big 12, which surprised me, because they used to be in a different conference before. Obviously, Duke and North Carolina is that one rivalry that I think will live on forever. But it's also to the point with those two teams, especially with Duke, it's such a group of pompous a-holes that some people get turned off by it from time to time, the Duke North Carolina rivalry. Yeah, and then again, when the best players aren't staying in college for more than 1 year, if they're going to college at all.
Right.
Again,
That's been the bigger problem, Sap, is that more of these players, the 1 year thing was, people were like, yeah, this sucks, like, they're leaving, but you're still getting, like, Kevin Durant, like I said, you're still getting, like, amazing players. And now, because they're being offered, rightfully so, ability to get paid and forego college, it's an attractive option.
And again, if I'm representing a player, remember Zion in his 1 year at Duke kind of blew out his sneaker and had
Yes.
some sort of ankle injury. At
Right.
that moment, I would have said, Zion, you're done for the year. You've got too much to lose if you come
Right.
back and re-injure yourself. You're out for the year. Like Michael Jordan played 3 years at North Carolina. Patrick Ewing played 4 years at Georgetown. Tim Duncan probably would have played 6 years at Wake Forest if they let him. He loved the whole college experience. One of the greatest college basketball players ever. That didn't translate to being a great pro. Christian Laettner played all 4 years at Duke. So, they were so invested in those programs that they built tremendous personalities and a great fan base and a national fan base. Like Duke was the one team that you either loved or hated. And then
Right.
think back to the Fab Five in Michigan. That's a team that was polarizing as well. So you had so many great players, characters, rivalries that it made this tournament so much bigger. Now it's to the point where everyone has their brackets. They see how they do Thursday and Friday, and then they kind of lose interest in it. And we get to a Final Four, which we had last year of what? Connecticut, Florida Atlantic, Miami of Florida, and San Diego State. I mean, Connecticut obviously has become a blue blood. In fact, I think they've become the model franchise in college basketball, which, by the way, if Connecticut wins it this year, they will have won 6 national championships in men's basketball over the last 26 years, or the same amount as Duke and North Carolina combined during that period. That's how good Connecticut has been over the last quarter century, and they've done it with 3 different coaches.
Yeah, and Sap,
So
Duke and North Carolina both. Sorry, Duke only has 5 total national championships. North Carolina 6, so UConn could surpass Duke and tie North Carolina.
exactly. And this has all been done in the last 26 years. And before that, before Jim Calhoun showed up there in the mid 80s, they were, as you said, a doormat. Uh, they were the worst team in the Big East, and then they kind of grew from there. And they've kind of done it also without a huge marquee player, right? Like the best player in Connecticut history might be Ray Allen, and he didn't play on a national championship team. Like, you had Richard Hamilton on their
Yeah,
first one. Kemba Walker was on one of them.
Emeka Okafor, I think, was
Emeka
on one of
Okafor was
them.
on one of them. Yeah, so they kind of had really good players, but it was all about the program. So there's a lot of reasons why I think it's lost its luster. Again, a big part of it is we just don't see the talent there anymore. I mean, look, if Victor Wembanyama had played 1 year college basketball, that would have been a very interesting tournament last year. If
Yeah,
LeBron James had played 1 year college basketball, I'm sure Ohio State or wherever he went to would have been in the
Akron.
Final Four. Yeah, if he went to the University of Akron, that would have been really cool. He's given a lot of money to the school in the meantime to maybe make up for not going there. Kobe was supposed to go to Duke,
Right.
right? So that would have been obviously interesting to see. But the sport was still huge at that point because most of the players were at least one and done, or they were staying a couple of years, and you could really build those rivalries. Now it's just like, who are these people? Like, as I said, the top players in the NBA either never played college basketball or were one and done, and even then, their college teams didn't really make much of a run. Jason Tatum didn't do much at Duke. He missed time there, and his team didn't really have a great run. Kyrie Irving only played 10 games at Duke when he was there back over a decade ago. Zion, Cam Reddish, and RJ Barrett. That was the threesome that looked like it was going to have a great run in the tournament and bring back the star power to the tournament, but they lost to, I believe, Michigan State in the regional final back in 2019.
Yeah, it's I've been watching the tournament obviously for a long time, and it seems like each year it just kind of diminishes in terms of the talent pool, and I don't begrudge any of the players for going out and seeking money or shutting it down if they're going to get hurt. That doesn't really happen as much in college basketball as so much in college football, because these tournament games matter, and the stupid bowl games other than the national championship and maybe like the Rose Bowl don't really matter to play in. So I don't see that it's going to change. It just seems like it'll always remain popular because the nature of it is exciting, but it's definitely does not have the gravitas that it used to, Sap.
No, not at all. Again, it's one of those sports where you have a niche following throughout the season, and those fans are going to be there throughout the tournament. And then you have this wide base that gets involved Thursday and Friday. People take time off from work. You have office pools, and then after Friday, everyone kind of loses a little bit of interest.
Well, do you also feel like, Sap, a big part of college sports, perhaps the biggest, is the personality of the coaches, right? And we had all these
Mm-hmm.
legendary coaches for such a long time: Coach K, Roy Williams, Bobby Knight, Jim Calhoun, uh, John Calipari still coaches. The list goes on and on. I'm forgetting the guy's
Well,
name who
Rick
coached
Pitino obviously has
Georgetown.
won
Rick
2 national
Pitino. Yeah,
championships, and
sure.
I'm still shocked that they didn't put St. John's into the tournament. First of all, they're
Because
based
they
in New
hate
York
him.
City, but they hate him, and I do
Yeah.
think he's the best in-game
John
college
Thompson
coach
was
of the
another big
men's.
personality.
Huge Lou Kinasek at St.
Yeah.
John's, Rolly Massimino at Villanova. These were like
They
larger than life
and
characters.
so like all these guys are now retired and some have
Yeah,
passed away. And so you don't really it's much more like corporate now. Does that seem like the right word for it, Sap?
yeah, they're more like Brad Stevens. Like Brad Stevens did go to 2 national championship games at Butler. That's kind of like what everyone's looking for. The guy who, if he wasn't a college basketball coach, would be working in the financial industry or being an airline pilot because he has the right temperament. So that's kind of what you're getting now. Yeah, you don't have the crazy personalities. I mean, no one's picking up a chair and throwing it across court the way Bobby Knight did, or you didn't have Jerry Tarkanian, who's teething on a towel during UNLV games. Like these were real characters. They did exist. So yeah, they were larger than life. And now you have kind of like ex players who just retired from the NBA 10 years ago or from college basketball 15 years ago. They're in their late 30s, early 40s because they have a lot of energy.
I like Dan
They can
Hurley, who
recruit.
coaches UConn,
Yeah,
Tony
he is
Bennett, who coaches
right.
Virginia.
Well, Hurley is a personality because he's insane. Like I would love to see Connecticut play the Celtics in a scrimmage. Obviously, the Celtics would win by 50, but you'd have 2 insane coaches that might get into a fist fight along the benches. In Joe Mazzulla and Danny Hurley. But yeah, the lack of that as well. It's 6 or 7 different things. It's still going to get good ratings. It's a massive TV event, and someone will be crowned in early April as national champions. But it just doesn't have that pull the way it did 10, 15, 20 years ago.
No, and it's hard to remember. Once you get removed a couple months from the tournament, and if you ask somebody who won the tournament, most people will not remember.
Right.
It doesn't have that staying power unless it's like like a team like probably people remember that Kentucky team that you mentioned because they were like gangbusters. Everybody remembers that Syracuse team with Carmelo Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
Those back-to-back Florida teams were, but recently I think people would struggle with going back even 2 years, like name the last 2 national champions. I think that would be hard. It'd be interesting too, Sap, to do a trivia of those guys who went straight from high school to the NBA to see where they had committed to go to school. And sort of play out an alternate history version of what would have happened, like you said, if Kobe had went to Duke, or I think Kevin Garnett was going to go to Maryland.
That would have been interesting. Yeah, and I think LeBron, I believe Ohio State, but
yeah,
I mean,
it would have been cool if he went to Akron, but like that probably wasn't realistic.
But I think by his junior year in high school, he knew he was going to go right to the pros after his senior year of high school. Like he probably didn't even consider that, although maybe he did.
Yeah, it's too much. It's too much money to pass up on. I mean, I still think they should allow high schoolers in, but that's another topic for another day. We'll switch back to the NBA. For a bit here, as everybody gets ready to fill out their brackets. And Sep, we're usually talking about the Celtics, the Bucks, the Nuggets, the Thunder, the Timberwolves. We throw in the Lakers and the Warriors in there. We haven't talked too much about the team that's actually in the biggest media market in the country, in the New York Knicks, a lot. So we're gonna give them a little bit of love today. They are 41-27 on the season, which is an excellent record, though they are 13 games behind the Boston Celtics, who are just again running away with everything. So Sap, this Knicks team, I think the past 2 years you and I've predicted the Knicks to take a step back, and they have yet to do that. So what's the secret sauce for this Knicks team, Sap?
They're one team, and they may be the only team in the league, along with maybe the Pelicans, who bring it every single night. They bring it for 48 minutes every single night. So you're going to stockpile some wins when you do that. Now, how that translates to the postseason, we'll have to wait and see what it does this year with the Knicks. Now, the Knicks did beat Cleveland last year, which I thought was an upset. I thought Cleveland was going to have a nice run last year, and the Knicks beat them in 5 games. And then the Knicks went 6 tough games with the Miami Heat. So I think the reason they're able to compile this 41-27 record, despite not having Julius Randle for the last 5-6 weeks, who's arguably their best player, although Jalen Brunson, I think, is kind of seized that crown this
or
year.
OG for a little while too. They didn't have Anunoby either.
They never lose when OG plays. I mean, he's got this incredible record when he's on the court. The Knicks never lose, so they bring it every single night. They play defense. Tom Thibodeau is one of the very best coaches in the league. He gets the most out of his talent. Pretty much has been able to do that everywhere he's coached, with the possible exception of maybe one year in Minnesota, where I think Jimmy Butler derailed things with the Timberwolves. but that's a big reason why they're able to go out and win maybe 50 games this year and be the 4 seed and be a pain in the butt in the first round against Orlando, whoever they play, and they'll be a pain in the butt in the second round to the Celtics. They won't beat the Celtics. In fact, the Celtics should beat them in 5 games. They've swept them so far in the regular season 4-0. But I think because they come every single night and they play the full 48, they bust their ass, they play defense, they pass the basketball, and then you've got a player like Jalen Brunson who's able to win games on his own. That's why they're on their way to winning 50 games, which I think a talented team, but not an overly talented team. I just think the fact that in a league where you have load management and guys taking nights off and guys not showing up from game to game and teams kind of mailing it in, road game number 4 in a week. Yeah, we don't feel like playing tonight. This team brings it every night, and that's a big reason why they've been able to stockpile wins. And I don't want to take away from them because they're really, really good and they're extremely well coached.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have that top of the line talent that the Bulls did when Tom Thibodeau was their coach, but similar. I mean, this is just what he does. He gets his teams to buy in and play really, really hard. A lot of times, it only works for a couple of seasons, and then they get they injuries pile up because he plays guys very heavy minutes, and they have to play really hard the entire game, or he's taking them out. So they don't have that like Derrick Rose caliber player, but Jalen Brunson's a pretty damn good facsimile. I think he's a well deserving of, in my mind, second or third team All NBA this year. He's an All NBA player to me, Jalen Brunson this year. I think he, based off of their record and how well he's played, he certainly deserves that honor. And they have nice pieces around the fringes. They have guys who do specific jobs. Like they have they lost their center at the beginning of the year. I don't know why I'm forgetting his name for a second, but Isaiah Hartenstein has done a really nice job fitting it. Mitchell Robinson is who got hurt. Sorry, and Hartenstein's done a great job. Josh Hart is one of those players that any team would like to have. He just does a little bit of everything. Jeez, I was looking last night at the box score. He played 48 minutes, so he played the entire game. DiVincenzo having a great year shooting the three. Precious Achumwa, who they got in the trade, he rebounds the basketball well. They have a couple other guys who just shoot threes, some guys who just play defense, some guys who just collect rebounds. They have guys who have bought into their doing what the Patriots had, do their job. Now, I'm not saying the Knicks are going to be the Patriots and winning, started ripping off championships, but it's a methodology that works, and it certainly maximizes taking a roster that's not necessarily limited, but doesn't have that top flight talent like like a Jason Tatum, like a Luka Doncic, like a Steph Curry, LeBron James, and still putting them in a position to have a 50-win season, which is really impressive. And I also, Sap, looking at these deeper numbers, the Knicks have the second best point differential in the Eastern Conference to the Celtics. The Celtics are far and away have an 11, almost 12-point differential, which is insane. That's so much better than everybody else in the league. But next is the Knicks with 4.1, which shows how seriously they take things on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, they do everything pretty well, right? And again, they're a competitive team that plays every night, so they're going to get those wins. They're well coached. As you said, they have certain players filling out certain roles, and then you've got Jalen Brunson, who's able to win games on his own. Look, Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, and again, Randle hasn't played for 5 to 6 weeks. Those have to be two of the best free agent signings of the last decade, especially for the value.
Tremendous.
I mean,
tremendous.
Obviously, Kevin Durant, you signed him as a free agent. Whoever else, LeBron James with the Lakers. Okay, no brainers. You're getting all-time great players on a free agent
already
contract.
Established as all-time great players by the point they had signed. Right.
Yeah, when the Knicks signed Julius Randle, I'm like, that's an odd acquisition, and he's turned out to be fantastic.
Well, at that point, they had like 15 power forwards, remember, on their roster.
Remember, they cornered the market on power forwards. And then a couple of summers ago, they signed Jalen Brunson. I'm like, okay, I guess that's a good signing. It's turned out to be phenomenal. I agree with you. He's, at worst, third-team All-NBA. I mean, first-team All-NBA in the backcourt's going to be SGA and Luka. Second team, maybe Anthony Edwards and Steph Curry, and maybe you got Jalen Brunson third team, and then you got to figure out what Jaylen Brown is. Is he a forward? Is he a
I mean,
guard? I mean,
Halliburton, you could put
Halliburton's in there
Halliburton.
for sure too. Yeah. So, but he merits being all NBA without question. Maybe most improved player. He
Yeah,
won't get really any MVP votes because you can only select 5. Look, there'll be some MVP voter out there that throws them a 5th spot because they just want to be different than everyone else.
sure.
But it's a really intriguing team, and I think it's a team that New York's really embraced. New York to me is the best basketball city in the country. I mean, they eat, drink, sleep, love basketball. Look, to support that team that hasn't won a
Oof.
championship in over 50 years and has only been to the finals twice since then is pretty remarkable. And it's a very knowledgeable basketball city, as is Boston, as is Philadelphia, Chicago, go right on down the line, Los Angeles, all the major cities that are great basketball towns. But to me, New York is the best because it's kind of like ingrained in the psyche of New Yorkers, and they are crazy fans, and you can just see how Madison Square Garden is night in and night out, how much they really love and support this team. Going forward, they kind of need, compared them to the Patriots, well, they don't have Tom Brady. They have a lot of other
Right.
pieces. They have their Rob Gronkowski, or they have their Julian Edelman, or they have their pick any defensive player from the early part of the Patriots dynasty. They don't have Tom Brady. Now, I've always wondered, why can't New York attract those incredible free agents? Like,
Well,
if we
Brooklyn
go back,
did.
Brooklyn did. That's the strange thing. Like, we thought Durant and Kyrie were going to the Knicks, but of course, because Kyrie has to be different and be a
Mhm.
contrarian and be, Kyrie, he talked Durant and going to Brooklyn. Well, the Knicks have been much better than Brooklyn in the last few years
They
because
have.
Durant and Kyrie were kind of disasters in Brooklyn, whereas Randall, at least up until recently, shows up and plays every night, and we see that with Jalen Brunson. And I don't know how Durant and Kyrie would have worked with Tom Thibodeau. I don't think that would have worked.
No,
Obviously,
no,
no,
I don't.
that would
No.
not have worked at all. That's a whole different uh, discussion. But that's what they need, is to go forward and get that all-time great player. I
Well, it's
played with
interesting,
the I.
Sap, but that they've never had that. They have
No,
one MVP in the history of their franchise, Willis Reed, and
yep.
I don't know that anybody would ever really considered him the best player in basketball at any point in his career. Just because you're an MVP doesn't make you the best player
They,
in
yeah,
basketball.
they've never had the best player in
Have they
basketball
ever even
at
had
no
a
point.
guy who was considered a top 3 or 5 player in basketball?
Maybe
Like, I
maybe
don't think
Walt Frazier.
yeah, maybe Walt Frazier
Walt
for a
Frazier was
small
always,
period of time.
yeah, he was always first team All NBA. You could put him there. Ewing, I mean, Ewing was never even really the best center in basketball. There was always someone better when he
Hakeem,
came into the
right?
league. Hakeem was just better throughout.
Shaq
So
was better.
Shaq was better. Bernard King was an MVP candidate, but that was for a short period of time in the 80s. Yeah, I mean, for a franchise,
Carmelo,
yeah, he finished second one year to LeBron in the MVP voting, but I never thought of him as a top 3 or 4 player. I just
yeah.
didn't. He had a great year on a team that got to the second round of the playoffs, and actually Gary Washburn of the Globe gave Carmelo a first place vote for
I remember
MVP,
that
and that's
was
the
just
only
absurd.
reason that
Yeah,
LeBron wasn't
absurd.
unanimous. And we had him on back on 15-10, and I asked him about it, and he got all offended. I'm like, well, you voted that way, so explain yourself. Like LeBron clearly was the MVP of the league that year and many other years. Give the guy a second place vote, but not a first place vote. That would be warranted. So, yeah, they've never had the guy who has been the best player in basketball at any point. Now, in 1975, when Kareem demanded a trade from the Milwaukee Bucks, he wanted to go to the Knicks or the Lakers. And being such a poorly run franchise, the Knicks didn't pony up and get the best player in basketball at that time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he went to LA, and obviously once Magic got there, they won 5 championships together. So that's the thing about the Knicks. They haven't been able to follow through on getting that all-time great player. Now,
Wasn't
I
Kareem
played.
from New York?
He's from New York. Yeah, that's what people
Jeez,
forget to
what a
realize.
whiff.
He's a huge New Yorker. Well, I sound like something out of Seinfeld here. He's a New Yorker. Literally, is a huge guy, 7'2", but he's a New Yorker. He's a huge Dodger fan because he grew up as a Brooklyn Dodger fan, and then he loved Jackie Robinson, and he followed and became a Dodger fan once, even when they moved to LA, I believe. But I always played with the idea of LeBron playing in New York, and I thought in 2010, when he was a free agent at the age of 25, that he was going to go to the Knicks, and they couldn't get the job done. He went to Miami instead. I don't know if they just haven't had the lure of the coach or the
Might be the owner.
executive
It might be
or
that
the
might
owner.
just be it
Could be
right
the owner
there.
too. Yeah,
No one wants to deal with
Dolan
him.
is not not the best owner in the league when he's, buying former great players from Madison Square Garden
Yeah,
because they have
trying to
something
sell
bad to
his
say about him.
CDs to during free agency
Yeah.
pitches.
Yeah, he's kind of
Weird
he's kind
guy.
of the
He's a
Jim
weird
he's the
guy.
Jim Irsay of the NBA, like
Yeah.
this out there owner who inherited the team
Nepo
because he was
baby. Yeah.
lucky. Yeah, Nepo baby for sure. But could LeBron finish up his career in New York, and would it really matter? I mean, yeah, it would. They sell a lot of seats. Maybe the Knicks make this huge play and draft Bronny in the second round. If they have any second round picks, who the hell knows who has any second round
The
picks in the
Celtics have
NBA?
like 1,000.
Draft Bronny with it,
Yeah, I know.
right? And get LeBron here, and he needs a fifth championship. This would be a good place to win it.
Yeah, it's interesting. But basketball is infinitely better when the Knicks are relevant, and even though they have no shot in hell of winning a championship with this team, they are a solid playoff team, a very good team, and it's much more fun when they have something going on there. Last thing I want to talk about, Sap, we only got about 3 minutes left. Is there was a mega Anthony Edwards highlight last night over John Collins. People are calling it the dunk of the decade, dunk of the year, whatever. But I wanted to ask you, Sap, uh, if you elevate and throw the ball into the hoop, a la sort of Blake Griffin during the dunk contest. I think Dwight Howard did it too. Is that a dunk or is it a shot?
It's a shot. It's not a dunk. Okay, so let's say you dunk a donut into a cup of coffee. You literally have to move your hand into the cup of coffee and dunk the donut, right? So
Right.
you maybe your fingertips or whatever get to the rim of the cup. Well, in this case, in basketball, same theory applies, and you have to get rim on that. That's why I never thought Dwight Howard's dunk when he was wearing the Superman cape was
Right.
really a dunk. He kind of threw it through the rim. So this would be the case with Anthony Edwards, who I love and is phenomenal. I think could be the face of the franchise because he has the game and the personality to match. But no, you have to bang on that rim to qualify as a dunk.
Yeah, I don't think it's as complicated as the is a hot dog a sandwich question. Where you can have a real debate on both sides of that. You have to touch the rim for it to be a dunk. Not taking away from the play. A play was incredible. Anthony Edwards is maybe the most fun player currently playing in the NBA to watch. I mean, I'm not saying that as hyperbole. He is a blast to watch play basketball. It seems like every night he does something breathtaking, kind of like what John Morant was doing for a little while there. But he's bigger than John Morant too, and he can impact the game more. So he will probably go down as a better player than John Morant, taking away from the injuries and the gun stuff, whatever. But yeah, I'm with you, Sap. It's a shot, an incredibly athletic shot, but I don't know why suddenly this has been treated. People are calling these dunks when it's pretty clear to me that a dunk needs to involve the rim being touched.
Oh yeah, that's the beauty of the dunk too. I mean, obviously when Shaq dunked, or say Dr. J cuffing it coming down the left sideline and throwing it over Michael Cooper, the backboard starts rattling, the rim is shaking, all of that stuff. That's even more impressive. You just kind of throw it through. Yeah, it's a shot. It's not a dunk.
Right. When Michael Jordan switched hands against the Lakers, they didn't call that, wow, what a dunk that it was a layup. It was an amazing layup, but it was still
He
not a dunk.
he hung for like 10 seconds on that play. I was convinced there was like one of those folding tables, that you buy
Yeah.
at Costco or whatever, and you open them up and they're like 4 feet off the ground or 3 feet off the ground. I thought he was walking on one of those. That was still one of the most impressive things
I showed that to
among the many things the guy did.
I showed that to the kids at school that I teach, and they were blown away with pretty much
Yeah.
everything he did. His highlights
Yeah,
are
he's
still
good guy to
incredible
show.
to
Good guy
watch.
to show.
Yeah,
Now you must love basketball because this guy was awesome.
right, exactly. But that's gonna do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Check out their site and check out our social medias at JohnSap25 at Jet Stryer. And we'll be back with a new podcast very soon. Good luck in the tournament, everybody, and we will talk to you later. See ya.